Now, how do all these weights that amount to well over a ton for many abused individuals, locking them in at 4 years old so that they will be 4 years old until a ton of weight is removed from this mechanism and they learn the simple mechanism of pivoting it back and sliding through? How is this moved on to the conveyor belt that continually adds weight and locks this dynamic in place? Well, the first part is unconscious weight without a conscious backlash or antidote. What I mean is, when your cult taboo and your family taboo becomes your relational taboo, and these things come on and you won't talk about them because it's taboo, you're not conscious of them. Now, if ants are coming into your house by the thousands and eating your skin and leaving each one with a little chunk of your skin, and you say, ants are coming in by the thousand and eating a little chunk of my skin, you can and will respond. You'll get out a torch, you'll burn the path, you'll sweep them out, you'll spray ant spray, and you will live. When you're unconscious, if you have some bizarre taboo, this is how unscientific it gets, where your cult denies the reality of ants, and they're what's killing you, you're constantly going back and forth. I'm being eaten by something, but it doesn't exist. I'm being eaten by something, but it doesn't exist. If I admit that I'm being eaten by ants, my entire cult will throw me out because they're fucked up. But I can respond to the ants. But I might die because they throw me out because my needs for survival, security, love, and belonging are met by the cult. So, how am I going to deal with it? Insanity and belonging, or dealing with the ants? You can't respond to all of this in a cult that you can go from cradle to grave without getting a single example of what I'm talking about here, one. Or an alternative hypothesis. The hypothesis is simply shame. Real men don't feel any of these things, so you're feeling them? Oh my goodness, you must not be a real man. And unreal men are not very important, so now that you're not an unreal man, we're not going to deal with it either because you're an unreal man. So you cannot get more stupid, more barbaric, more shamefully immature than a cult that does this to children and adults alike, grown-ups, I should say. You don't get adults. Because an adult, by its very nature, responds to the data intelligently to create human well-being. You can't respond to data when it's taboo. So it's unconscious. That's one reason it's there and it's not being unloaded. It's being loaded onto. Next, the more traumatic the wound. Let's say you've figured this all out. You know your beliefs. You've cleared out this. You've done some energy healing. I'm no longer going to be guilt tripped by my mother and all this. So you've worked through it. And it's good. You've got a conscious strategy. You've worked it out. I'm not going to talk. But then one day your mother shows up at your house when you're in a hurry. And you've got social mannerisms that say, well, come in, mother, ruin my life, please. I've only got a very important job interview that you're sabotaging right now. But of course, I would love to see you. I mean, why would I possibly want you to make an appointment before flying 4,000 miles to find me when I got this far away to escape? Of course, come in. So if it happens really fast, you got hit by a car, then this happened, then you go into reaction. Well, reaction is what's familiar, okay, abuse contracts keep me alive and all that. In the younger ages, figure out what they did to survive because you don't know. You don't know what you're supposed to do here because your cult has not prepared you for life. You see, if we prepared high school students for life, then they'd know how to deal with insurance companies when they try and scam you and not pay the da-da-da-da-da. We'd know how to deal with attorneys. We'd know how to start a business. We'd know how to drive a car. We'd know how to have a healthy sexual relationship. We'd actually be prepared for life by learning life skills. But we've got something else entirely set out for you. We're going to prepare you for life by teaching you algebra, a daily necessity if you live in the United States. I mean, haven't you often wanted to take actual things like 3 bags of almonds, and instead of calling them 3 bags of almonds, say that almonds are A. So A plus C divided by B. Why don't you just give me the fucking recipe? No. A plus C divided by B. Now A is almonds, and this and that. Can't we just say almonds? No. This is algebra, an important life skill. You say, so if we don't prepare a grown-up for the actual experiences that they're going to be thrust into at high speed, it's the young ones. The grown-up says, I don't know what the fuck to do with an insurance claim. I've never had to deal with that. Let's see, A is for apples, A plus B. I don't know. The 4-year-old says, I know. I freeze and I say nothing. And the 6-year-old says, I lie. Whatever they say, I say I didn't do it because I get beaten. Okay, so who's in there feeling the most feelings? Okay, it's you, the 6-year-old? Okay, that's what we're going to do. I don't know. It wasn't me. That's your car right there. It wasn't me. So the 6-year-old sabotages the situation because there is no competency in an emotionally illiterate, but not just an emotionally illiterate. We're talking technically illiterate. There's all kinds of things thrown at us in these cults. Scammers, internet scammers, password scammers, people stealing identity. No one taught you any of that in high school, so you have no idea what to do other than freeze, do this, etc., etc. So this is part of the speed at which something happens can trigger this because you don't get 3 months. Nobody says, oh, so-and-so has just had an identity theft, so we're not going to hold him accountable for sales targets this quarter. We're going to give them the bonus anyway, and they're going to spend time learning the things that they could have been taught in high school, but we didn't bother teaching them. The next thing that shoves these things on are when you have unresolved emotions. They serve as kind of trigger points. And reality is holographic. We like to think of it in our bizarre cultural ways, but reality is holographic in many ways. And so there's multiple doorways into an experience, including a traumatic experience. One is, what were you smelling at the time that you felt that trauma at 4 years old? The smell of burnt chocolate chip cookies. My mother just hit me over the head because I burned the chocolate chip cookies. So now there is burnt chocolate chip cookies as a smell laced into the biology of being hit over the head by a giant. I've just smelled burnt chocolate chip cookies. Where's the giant? Where's the giant? Where's the giant? There is no giant. Yes, there is. Yes, there is. I know it. Because it didn't get talked about. It didn't get apologized for. No giant apologizes and says, this is how we're going to do this next time. You will not be hit over the head by a giant and nearly killed. You'll be da-da-da-da-da. Nobody ever explained that. They just glared at you. Don't say a word. You sassy kid. Get out of here. So it got blocked off, which means that the 6-year-old is still expecting every time there's burnt cookies, it could happen again because he hasn't had it explained to him. There's been no apology. There's been no repair, nothing. So through the senses, okay, what was he looking at? The giant was wearing a red silk shirt before she attacked me. Oh, my date is wearing a red silk shirt. Get away. I don't know why. I can't find my voice. Modern, up-to-date software me. I had a nice witty remark planned, but the 6-year-old, get away, she's going to kill us. All of the senses that correlate around unresolved traumas are doorways back into the unresolved issue, doorways into the unknown in a traumatically illiterate cult. Contract terms come up. The abuser in our present day reality, or even like, a spouse says, if you do that, I will leave you. Okay? That's what mom said. Only the words bring us back to 6 years old. If you do that, I will leave you. Well, the adult might say, well, good. Because if I cheat on you with your best friend, lie about it, harm our daughter, and drink away the family fortune, you should leave me. Because that's not love and that's not partnering and blah, blah, blah. Good. Thanks for telling me. I'm glad you're fighting for our marriage. That's a good thing to do. Please do leave me if I do that. No. It triggers an unresolved 6-year-old who's going to die if mom leaves. No, you can't. Well, then don't cheat on my best friend. No, you can't. Oh, and a 6-year-old in terror with a grown-up body can actually beat the shit out of the projected mom. You can't leave me. Yes, I'm going to leave you. And no, you can't. And it can create a reaction because contract terms are spoken. The contract that the 6-year-old said, I will never do this, but you can never leave me. Language, similarly. So you have contract terms on everything but certain words. Certain words. You disgust me. Certain words. Language. Why? Because the ear heard that term, and the brain's job is to make pattern correlation. I heard that term, this happened. I heard that term, this happened. I heard that term, this happened. I just heard that term. It's 40 years later, but could happen. Now, the adult who has not gone back into this work has no idea where the anxiety comes from, and thus has no ability to answer the anxiety because it's unconscious. That's the problem with being a fucked up, emotionally illiterate cult. So when there's no consciousness, the adult assumes the threat is in the present and becomes paranoid. What do you mean you're going to leave me? Who said anything about that? You're abandoning me, you're killing me, Who said anything about that? You're 45 years old, you drive yourself to work. What's all this about? I don't know. I've had this feeling. Oh, those feelings. That's how an emotionally illiterate cult does. You had feelings. Oh, something feminine. Let's just dismiss it so that it won't become conscious. Then it will come up and build up and explode again and cause damage. Pattern recognition, of course. Anything there was a red light, there was green over on the distance, there was a smell of new mown hay. A red light, green, a new mown hay. Now, when these patterns are stored in the brain, they're not conscious. What don't you like about new mown hay? It's such a romantic evening. Get me out of this field. I don't want to have anything to do with it. Fine, if you're going to be like that. Get me out of this. And again, the reaction. It's like, and we learn that it's dangerous. There's all kinds of hidden rules that cannot be talked about. It becomes highly codependent. You apply my hidden roles, this role, and there's no way to deal with someone in this state, in this culture, because of the level of traumatic illiteracy. Now, if you're in a traumatically literate culture, you say, your eyes just darted in a way that corresponds with 80% flight pattern. Fight, flight, freeze, all traumatic terrain. There is a 90% chance you have a repressed trauma around something in this environment. Go through your senses. And they're going to say, you're right, smart, good job, good friend. Okay, eyes. If I close my eyes, I'm still anxious. Okay, it's not eyes. If I close my nose, It goes away. So there's a smell. What is the smell? I've done my inventory of lifetime traumas, and yes, one of them did happen in New Moon Hay. And so, yes, I haven't done that work there. So let's do a little meditation here. Let's go back, and 20 minutes later, we have a romantic evening in New Moon Hay that can mean something else than that my 6-year-old's going to be raped. How about that for an emotionally literate culture? How about that for a relationally intelligent culture? As opposed to, we can't ever go to New Moon Hay for the rest of our life. We can't talk about it for the rest of my life. And how dare you for suggesting that there's anything going wrong? I do not have feelings about this, and I'm not irrational, and I didn't ruin this date, and I'm leaving you, and blah, 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 blah. How about that for a little bit of intelligence, to actually respect and honor the feminine enough to study relational terrain in high school, something that we use every minute of every day, relational intelligence. Unlike algebra, unlike trigonometry, unlike doctored versions of history that obscure all the important patterns of abuse and trauma, unlike 80% of what we drag our youngsters kicking and screaming into bullying and traumatized environment to dissociate them and not prepare them for life. So we've got pattern recognition. Finally, survival need. If you are in a state of terror around actual or perceived trauma, you're near suicide, as an example. You are unsure you'll be able to cope because you've got medical bills coming in by the hundreds of thousands and you cannot possibly pay them off, and you don't know how you're going to cope. So if you are in a place of survival need, what you need is survival, security, love, and belonging. The golden ball, the pinnacle is love and belonging. Because if you truly are loved and belong, other people will protect your life as their own. That's what it means, by the way, to love and belong. Not the words, not the lip service, not the politicking, not the clicking on Facebook. But when you truly are loved and belong to another person or to a group, that group will be as motivated to protect your body, your well-being, your sanity, as they will to protect their own. That's what it means to belong, to be as one. To be as one. When you are truly married and your spouse gets fallen off a cliff, you fight the hell to get them the best medical treatment, etc., because they belong. You are as one. In a sociopathic cult, it's the exact opposite. The people who are advantageous, who are on top, get ass-licked. And the people who really need help get immediately shunted and thrown out the door because they're not going to benefit a narcissistic sociopath. The only one who can benefit a narcissistic sociopath is someone up at the top who has more resources than the narcissistic sociopath. So that's where you have the two-faced celebrity that, when they're being interviewed on TV, they're this way, and when they're treating their staff or their partner, etc., they're completely another way. Because the TV could get them a role that would make them millions and give them sex or power or whatever it is the narcissist is after. And, as soon as the camera's off, etc., fuck you, get the fuck out of my space, etc. And there's no connection. So survival need, is one of the reasons that children sign abuse contracts. A woman who doesn't know how to pay the rent, who doesn't know how to take care of her 2 children, who's feeling desperate alone, who's being stalked by a man who the police will not protect her from, is in a place of survival need. A man comes and says, I'll take care of you. I'll fuck your daughter. I'll fuck your daughter. I'll put a little screen in between it so it won't be totally obvious, but you'll know. Nobody says a word about it. We have a deal or not? It depends on the part of the brain the reptilian survival brain is not empathic. When the grown-up, the parent, is in the reptilian brain, they will sublimate the empathic protection and all of that of the daughter and elevate survival with fight, flight, freeze, manipulate sociopathic behavior. The terror goes down. Okay. Maybe there's a bargain struck. An abuse contract is signed. Maybe it's not. I'll fuck your daughter. Maybe it's, you better fuck me whether you want to or not, the way I want to fuck you. And the way I want to fuck you is I want to make you feel small. I want to make you feel worthless. And I want to get off on your terror. That would make me feel big. And if I feel big, that will balance out the fact that I feel smaller, that I'm now paying your rent and maybe my own survival is off the thing and da-da-da-da-da. So if you give me this, I'll give you this. Someone in survival need is going to sign that contract. It's not spelled out in writing. It's spelled out in facial expressions. You want to have sex? Well, I guess you'll be looking for a new place to live. I mean, obviously this isn't really working out for me. I don't have a lot of room in the house. Oh, I'd love to have sex with you. You're so sweet. Well, maybe we can continue this a little bit longer. It's negotiated in the contract of daily life. You want to work for this firm? You do understand you'll have to move to Australia, leaving your relatives behind. You can have a nice name, Google, Tesla. You can have a nice name, but, please understand, your family has to be put far behind. We're doing important work in the business world. You're not one of those women who thinks companies can put children in family. You're not one of those, are you? Good. You've got the job. Sign here. Abuse contracts are generally contracts that violate the feminine in response for a payoff. Social rank, money, survival, some sense of security. You can hang out with a famous person, for example. Oh, you're not really famous yourself, so I'm not sure how I could use you there, but you make me look important because I put you down. Ricky Gervais with his little sidekick, right? He's so dumb and adorable. He doesn't even know that he's dumb. It's wonderful. It's like you can be with the famous person as long as I can put you down, publicly humiliate you, or Norm, with his sidekick that's constantly humiliated, and so there's a lot of the humor ties in with a great deal of hostility and cruelty, in our culture in particular, because there's a lot of cruelty that's not being dealt with. So as you try and go into humor, you immediately puncture that layer of pain and humiliation, etc. So there's the contract. Increased survival. You're more known. You can be a celebrity based on being abused. It's up to you. Celebrity is high ranking, being abused, low ranking. Maybe overall you could get another job making more money being abused over there. And you can show how well you can be abused and humiliated in this job. And then you can go over there and make more money to be abused and humiliated in this other job. And your physical, that's the masculine, the physical survival and security will be upset, and maybe you'll even have people admiring you because they haven't received their own physical survival and security. You're now a millionaire. You may be in a fucked up job. You may not have a connection with your feminine self, but you're now a millionaire. And so you're high ranking in a sociopathic cult that values bits of paper more than human beings and more than the human soul, and certainly more than your own feminine self. So all of these push these loads, these high loaded objects, onto a given age and lock the fixated age in place. And what's incredibly important to understand is the implications of this. You cannot trigger out of an emotional age on your own with this kind of weight on it and surrounded by other people pushing this onto you. If you have a very good therapist and you can unload it brick by brick by brick by brick, you've got to be unloading bricks faster than the cult is giving you new bricks. Meaning if you feel shame every time you don't pay a bill, and your reality is giving you 2 unpaid bills a day, and your 1 hour of therapy, which creates another financial burden, gets you 5 bricks of shame tentatively pulled off, you're taking on water. Because every therapy session, you're adding another $170 to your bill. Then, your credit card debt and all that. And then you're lifting 4 bricks off with a therapist that somewhat believes the cult's idea that if you can't pay your bill, you're worthless, because people that don't pay her bill, she hates them. So it's kind of hard to pull off therapy and pull off, shame around that at that level. And no one's going to take any ownership of this. The cult is never going to apologize and say, "You're absolutely right. We gave you an 89% chance of crashing and burning that could have easily been averted and turned into an 89% chance of winning. But we don't love ourselves and we don't love you enough to do that. In fact, we are so committed to self-loathing and self-hatred that we are going to violate our own scientific data to willfully ignore what we know we need to do because we don't want to deal with our inadequacy as a cult." Particularly the people at the top, who are, of course, the only people worth protecting in a masculine chauvinistic system. The people at the top are masculine. So they've got to be protected. The leader is a masculine position. The followers, the circle, a feminine position. The leaders have always got to be protected. The joke being the nuclear fallout bomb center, so that after all of the American people were exterminated by a Cold War created by their governments, the only ones to survive such a mutual act of self-destruction would be the leaders who dropped the nuclear bombs to begin with. We couldn't possibly protect the people and kill the leaders. That would be to honor that the feminine position is equal to the masculine position. You have feminine and masculine position. For example, the listener is a feminine position, the speaker a masculine position, the leader a masculine position, the follower a feminine position, the initiator a masculine action, the responder a feminine action. So, it's and of course this is expressed genitally, in terms of the initiation, the receptivity, etc. It's expressed in the physics of gender. But every man has a feminine side, and every woman has a masculine side, and in many women are more masculine than many feminine men, and vice versa. So we're not talking gender here. We're not talking gender. Margaret Thatcher is as sociopathic, a masculine persona as they come, and Hillary Clinton would have done great. Would have done great leading with her masculine side more than perhaps a Jimmy Carter that would care about world truth and care about the circle, leading perhaps more with his feminine side than many men. But this stuff gets added to. It's not understood. It gets locked in place. Locked in place, it sets up a circle where the younger parts fuel the behavior of the present-day life without the software technology to do it. Most importantly, all it would take is 10 people in a ritual, maybe a few hours long, to lift this weight back off the individual and tell the 4-year-old that she is no longer going to be killed if she locks up because she needs to tell the truth to grow. But her abuse contract says if she tells the truth, she will die. That is what's called locked up. And if you have to choose between growing and dying in the hierarchy of human needs, survival, security, love and belonging, self-esteem beginning to grow, you pick survival. And that's why she's locked up at 4 years old. If that can be lifted through technologies, one technology called circling. There is, of course, no interest in the cult in the technology of circling because it honors the feminine, because the unknown is feminine. The known is a very, very tiny object, much like a proton or electron. The unknown is a vast object, like the space, the 99% that is the space between the proton and electron, the 99% that is the space between the planets in a fractal pattern. The feminine is vastly bigger than the masculine in men and in women. So it takes an incredible amount of hubris and stubbornness to be this illiterate and this committed to not seeing 99% of reality. 99% of all reality is unknown. And 99% of that is unknown. It's vast. And yet we cling to the known with a drive that is comical in its irrationality. Were it not for the fact that it calms us down from our traumatic terror of facing the unknown and the projection of more trauma in a traumatically illiterate, in an emotionally illiterate, in a relationally illiterate culture. As long as we have a culture that regularly triggers the vast majority of its citizens into inner emotional ages that are ill-equipped to deal with the decisions faced, as long as we produce one generation after another that lack the technical competency to engage with the reality we have invited them to engage with, as long as we ignore intergenerational abuse, ignore the feminine, ignore trauma, we will regularly induce each one of us into young emotional ages, incapable of making mature decisions, leading to reactivity and painful mistakes in the adult or grown-up world, which in turn trigger more fear and more regression. The only answer is to respond with honor to the feminine inside each one of us, and as individuals, and moving into collective, advocate for the significance in terms of evolution of all that which is feminine within us, within the environment, because feminine is an ecological awareness, whereas masculine awareness is that of the part. You see, masculine science consists of we invent a new chemical, and then we test that chemical in isolation on the body. Ecological sense says that that chemical will never be applied in isolation. It will be applied with some of the other 50,000 chemicals. We have to test ecologically. An ecological consciousness is necessary for the species to transcend its masculine bigotry, its fanaticism, its extremism, the extremism of developing the mind and shaming the heart, of overdeveloping the masculine and underdeveloping the feminine. That is extremism in the most radical expression possible, to split the world into yin and yang and shame and devalue half of the world and overvalue and overdevelop the other is to create imbalance and toxicity, with that imbalance to create dis-ease. Just like taking a bicycle wheel and cutting half of it off and trying to discard it, and then trying to drive with half of a wheel, and the incredible violence that that creates, to have half of the wheel missing. Thanks for joining me in this exploration. It's an honor.